Well, good evening, everybody from London, where summer has finally arrived, and welcome to this Harif Zoom. My name is Lynn Julius, and I'm ably assisted here by Lawrence on the technical side. Harif, for those who don't know us, is the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and we aim to raise awareness of the culture and history and heritage of these Jews. And this is actually our 119th Zoom call, which we started about the time of the pandemic. We have a website, www.harif.org, and we try and keep you up to date with the news on our blog, which is Point of No Return, and you can actually access that by clicking on news on the Harif website. And we encourage you to subscribe to the Harif website if you're not already there, because that way you'll get login details for our Zoom events and indeed details for all our events, whether in person or online. This session is being recorded and is actually being live streamed to the Harif Facebook page. And if you want to see any of our past recordings, just go to the Harif website and click on videos. There will be an opportunity to comment and to ask questions, but the only condition is that you use your real name if you want to ask a question.
We've got no Wonder Women tonight.
Oh, there are no Wonder Women tonight, so I don't think that will be a problem. So on to tonight's topic. The 9th of Av, or Tisha B'Ab, which will be upon us shortly, is a major day of mourning in Judaism. It involves fasting, and it's the culmination of 3 weeks, a 3-week period of mourning, and is often regarded as the saddest day of the calendar, of the Jewish calendar. It commemorates several tragedies throughout early Jewish history, namely the destruction of the first and the second temples in Jerusalem. Sephardi Jews, with their roots spanning the Iberian Peninsula, North Africa, and the Middle East, bring rich traditions and practices to the observance of Tisha B'Ab. So how does observance of Tisha B'Ab differ from one Sephardi community to the next? And here to enlighten us, I am absolutely delighted to introduce 3 distinguished guests. We have Rabbi Daniel Bouskila, Dayan Daniel Kada, and Etan Shelemay, and each will share their experience or their memories or their knowledge of Tisha B'Ab and how it is observed in each of their communities. So let's start with Rabbi Daniel Bouskila, who is the leader of the Sephardic Educational Center in the Old City of Jerusalem, and he is of Moroccan background. So over to you, Daniel, and Rabbi Daniel, and thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's not a pleasant topic, Tisha B'Av, but as you'll see, even in the Moroccan tradition, even Tisha B'Av has a beautiful rhythm to it. As tragic and difficult a day as it is, the liturgy, which is my primary emphasis tonight, the kinot, that's the main, the dirges, the lamentations that we spend the night and day of Tisha B'Av chanting, reading, studying, contemplating. We don't really study them, but sometimes we look and see a little bit of their meaning. It's the only, we're not even allowed to study Torah on Tisha B'Av because it brings us pleasure. We take a break from Torah study, except for very, very difficult texts that speak of the Churban, of the destruction, as was mentioned, the destruction of the first temple, the second temple, and many, many other calamities that befell the Jewish people, including, according to tradition, the expulsion from the Jews from Spain in 1492 and the spread of the Sephardic communities all around the Middle East and North Africa as a result of the expulsion. That was said to also have taken place on, according to tradition, on Tisha B'Av. It's a day that, unfortunately, if we look at the book of Kinot, the prayer book, if you will, for Tisha B'Av, originally, the original Kina, the original Lamentation that we read, was composed in the Bible by the prophet Yirmiyahu, according to tradition, Jeremiah, and this Kina is the book of Lamentations, Megillat Echa, the scroll of Lamentations of Echa. It's a 5-chapter poem that describes a desolate, destroyed Jerusalem. This was the original liturgy, and it still is the focal centerpiece of the liturgy of Tisha B'Av. But unfortunately, the day itself and its book grew as the calamities that befell the Jewish people continue to happen, some on Tisha B'Av, like expulsion from Spain, or many others that there wasn't necessarily a date, all the way through to the Shoah, the Holocaust. It's the tradition that all tragedies and calamities that befell the Jewish people in their small communities spread out throughout Sfarad and Ashkenaz, all over the place, are commemorated on Tisha B'Av. And unfortunately, when we take a journey through the book of Kinot, you're taking through a journey of the more difficult parts of Jewish history. And so I tonight chose, as a Jew of Moroccan background, to focus on very unique Kinot that are not unique in terms of the text itself only to the Moroccans. What's going to be Moroccan about my presentation tonight is primarily the chanting, which is in the sort of Andalusian tradition. I'm going to chant a few selections, but I want to talk about 2 Kinot that I think are very unique in terms of their theme, one of which is unique to the Sephardic tradition. It's not found in the Ashkenazi Kinot. The other is found in both, but I'm going to chant it in the Sephardic tradition. So I want to begin with a very interesting point in Jewish tradition. There's the Jewish calendar is actually so fascinating. The Jewish calendar tells a story for us. And I don't have the time to get into the detail of how the Jewish calendar is more than something we use to flip pages and mark dates. The Jewish calendar tells a story, month by month, week by week, day by day. It's a story, it's a journey. And there is a very unique technicality when the rabbis in the Talmud set up and fixed the calendar that we currently use, the Hebrew calendar. They set up a very interesting sort of peculiarity. And that is that whatever night Pesach falls out on, that will also be the night Tisha B'Av falls out on. That's the way it works every year. This year, we sat down to the Seder on a Monday night. In a few weeks, we're going to sit down on the floor to no Seder, to no food, but only to Kinot and fasting, also on a Monday night. Every year, that's the way it is. The Talmud set that up. And if you look on the calendar, whatever night Pesach falls out on, the first Seder, is also the night that Tisha B'Av will fall out on just a few months later. Stop and think about what that says, the story it tells, that on the same night, if you will, you're experiencing 180-degree the opposite, one from the other. The night of Pesach is a night of celebration. The night of Tisha B'Av is a night of mourning. The holiday of Pesach celebrates liberation and freedom of the Jewish people, the birth of the Jewish nation. Tisha B'Av mourns the loss of our independence, the loss of our freedom, the loss of our land, the destruction of our temple, the loss of our identity as a people in our land, over and over. And the themes of both are complete opposites, but the rabbis decided to make this a parallel. So a very, very creative Sephardic poet of unknown origin wrote a Kina that tells the story in a language that only those who know the tradition of both Pesach and Tisha B'Av will understand. But even if you don't know anything about about Tisha B'Av, Pesach, you know that we sit down and we start the evening by asking questions. Those questions, Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. All of you know, if I say Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot, those are the opening questions of the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Traditionally, a child, someone who doesn't know, will ask, will chant those questions. That's the kickoff, if you will, to Magid, to the telling of the Pesach story. The night of Tisha B'Av, in the Sephardic tradition, there is a Kina that the Sephardim read. I'm going to chant a little bit of it in the Andalusian Moroccan tradition, that starts like this. Alechem Eda Kdosha, has a beautiful rhyme. Alechem Eda Kdosha, Esh'al mikem she'elot, manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. To you, my sacred community, I will ask you questions. Why is this night different from all other nights? Sound familiar? Just a few months ago, on the same night, on a Monday night, we sat down to a beautiful Pesach Seder with a white tablecloth and beautiful foods that are unique and that each tell a story of liberation, the matzah, the exodus from Egypt, chanting Hallel. What a celebratory night. How did it happen that just a few months later, we're sitting around, not a table, but on the floor? We have ashes on our heads. We had a very small, meager meal to launch this fast, nothing special, a meal of like mourners with an egg and with lentils and very little. We don't even make Birkat HaMazon together. And we say, why? What happened? Manishtana layla hazeh mikol halelot. We're asking now for Tisha B'Av. And here's how the first stanza goes. Madua belel Pesach ochlim matzot umrolim. Why is it on Passover night we eat matzah and maror? Ata halayla hazeh, but on this night, savanu buz umorim. We are now satiated on only bitterness. We're not eating anything, and we're satiated only on bitterness. And so the entire poem goes on, stanza after stanza, Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot, drawing the contrast, not the comparison, but the contrast between the celebration of Pesach and the mourning, the Avelut of Tisha B'Av. Here's how it sounds. Alechem Eda Kdosha, Eshal mikem she'elot, Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot, Madua belel Pesach, Ochlim matzot umrorim, Ata halayla hazeh, Sab'anu buz umrorim, Al hereg haksherim, Ve'al zera yesharim, Al ken bivi v'chi ta'amrurim, Esa koholi kecholot, Manishtana halayla hazeh, mikol halelot. The last one of the stanzas is Madua belel Pesach of omrim shpoch bezimra. Why do we say shpoch hamatcha in joy? Ata beleze shatinu la'an rosh umara. On this night we drink again bitterness. Ki simcha nedara dalket Tzion avelot, because our joy is gone and the land of Zion is in mourning. Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. We end with the question, Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. So this is a very unique tradition that is a reflection of something that the Talmud teaches and the Sephardim have included in their liturgy. And when I say it's a beautiful Kina, I remember a mentor of mine told me that the day Mashiach comes, if the Mashiach will arrive even one day before Tisha B'Ab, the Moroccan tunes for the Kinot are so beautiful that the Moroccan community will look at the Mashiach and say, we're so happy you've come, but you know what? We're still going to recite the Kinot because we love chanting them. They're so liturgically beautiful. Let me chant briefly one more and I'm going to conclude. This one also reflects the contrast. And this one is included in both the Ashkenazi and Sephardic tradition. Esh tukad bekilbi, a fire is burnt within me. Okay, and each stanza concludes Bitzetim Mitzrayim, when I left Egypt, Bitzetim Yerushalayim, when I left Jerusalem. It's the same thing as the Manishtana. It draws the contrasts of how I felt so happy when I left Egypt and how I feel so downtrodden and in mourning and embarrassed in leaving Jerusalem. And here's how the Moroccans sing this again. And it's a long one, and it's one of the most beautiful moments of Tisha B'Ab. It brings a powerful unity, and it has a great rhythm. אשתוקד בקרבי, בהלותי על לבבי, בצאתי ממצרים, קיני מעירה, למען נזכירה, בצאתי מירושלים, אז ישיר משה, שיר לא ינשה, בצאתי ממצרים, ויקונן ירמיה, ונהניה, בצאתי מירושלים. I'm not to end on a negative. I'm going to conclude now by reading or chanting the very, very last stanza of this that I was just chanting, because we have a tradition that we never end on a negative. When we get an aliyah to the Torah, we make sure that when we're called to the Torah, the final verse is never something negative. You don't leave that way. And so in order to make sure that this poem does not end with Bitseti Yerushalayim, my leaving to Jerusalem, it ends like this. Sason v'simcha v'nas yagon v'anacha b'shuvi Yerushalayim. It ends with the words not Betzetim Yerushalayim, when I left Jerusalem, but b'shuvi Yerushalayim, when I've returned to Jerusalem. I have to say that when I read this, and I feel what a privilege it is that I direct a Sephardic center that is in the old city of Jerusalem. What a place to observe and spend Tisha B'Av, to hear these tunes, B'shuvi Yerushalayim, in our return to Jerusalem. Shalom, everyone. Wishing all of you a meaningful Tisha B'Av, with the prayers that the Messiah will come and that we won't have to fast. But as I said, as a Moroccan, I guarantee you that even if you come to Jerusalem and the Messiah is here and everybody's celebrating, you're still going to find a Moroccan minyan, with me included, chanting these very beautiful tunes. We just won't give them up. Shalom, everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I thought that was absolutely lovely. Okay, so we move east to Syria and the Levant, and I'd like to introduce Dayan Daniel Kada, our next speaker, and he is the rabbi of the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue of Holland Park in London. So over to you, Dayan Kada.
Thank you, Lynn, for the introduction, and thank you, Rabbi Bouskila, for that fascinating presentation. So we are now moving, as Lynn said, to Syria, And I wanted to share with you really some of the unique customs of Syria, specifically of Damascus. So when I say Syria, I'm talking of Damascus. My parents immigrated from Damascus in 1985, so just 40 years ago or so. So these are not my living experiences, but they are certainly experiences which I heard over and over again each year from my father and mother, and so that's why I want to share with you. But just before I do that, just wanted to say a couple of things about what Rabbi Bouskila said. Firstly, on the liturgy. So I think it's fascinating that there are variations to the tune, but essentially all the communities, the tunes are very similar. And I find that unique, and I'll tell you why. Because when I joined the Spanish and Portuguese about 10 years ago, I found the tunes extremely difficult to learn because they were very different. Coming from the Middle East, coming from the Syrian background and Syrian tunes, and then being thrown into the Western Spanish and Portuguese was quite something to learn. But yet, when it came to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur specifically, it's amazing how the tunes were so similar. Despite the fact that the rest of the year they're so different, but at the unique occasions, the tunes seem to be very similar. And I think Tisha B'Ab is the same as well. That Tisha B'Av, the uniqueness of this day, despite the fact it's a sad day, and despite the fact we don't want this day, and we don't really want to be singing the Kinot, at least in our tradition, we don't want to be singing the Kinot. But it's amazing how the tunes are the same. So I'm just going to sing to you Alechem Eida Kedosha, the four questions which we say on Pesach, which we ask on Tisha B'Av, similar questions, but you listen to the tune, it's very similar to how Bouskila chanted it, but slightly different. עליכם עדה קדושה אשאל מכם שאלות למה בליל זה אוכלים מצה ומרור עתה בליל זה אוכלים, etc. So it's similar, different, but I just found that interesting. Coming now to the customs of Tisha B'Av. So there is a halacha that the final meal before Tisha B'Av is what we call the Sudah HaMafseket. And there are many customs which Sfaradim and Ashkenazim have during the 3 weeks. Many of them are customs not halachically required. There are some things which are halachically required. So for example, many of us will not consume meat or wine during the 9 days in anticipation for Tisha B'Av. That is a minhag of many Sfaradim, not all Sfaradim, but many Sfaradim do not consume meat or wine during the 9 days. But that's a custom. The time when one's not allowed to have meat or wine is during the Sudah HaMafseket. That's what the Gemara tells us, and this is codified in the Halakha, that this is the time when it's strictly prohibited to indulge in meat, wine. And the Hachamim also added that one should only have, as a sign of mourning, although on Yom Kippur, the Sudah HaMafseket, the final meal of Yom Kippur, we eat as much as we can, we eat delicious foods. On Tisha B'Av, aside from the fact that you can't have meat and wine during the final meal, but also you have to have only one dish. So we wash for it, we have bread, but together with the bread, we consume only one dish, which means only one cooked dish. You can have fruit, you can have vegetables, but cooked foods, what we call in Hebrew a tafshil, you could only have one. So if you were cooking eggs, that would be it. If you were cooking fish, that would be it. You can only have one cooked dish. That's the halachic requirement. In the minhag of the Syrians is that we have something what we call in Arabic majiddara. Majiddara is rice and lentils, and both of these are cooked dishes. And that's all we eat in the final meal of Sudah HaMafseket, the majiddara. We have bread together with the rice and the lentils. And the reason why we're allowed to have this, despite the fact that it's two cooked dishes, is because we say that since they are normally eaten together, this is a classical Syrian dish, classical Middle Eastern dish of rice and lentils together. So despite the fact they are two cooked dishes, we view them as one cooked dish. It's not rice and lentils, it's majiddara. It's one thing. And so that's what we have on Tisha B'Av in the final meal. And that's where you have to fill yourself up. Before that, you can eat lots of other things. fish, etc., and eggs. But when you come to the Sudah Mafseket, all you're having really is bread together with the Majiddara, which is 2 cooked dishes, but we consider it as being 1 cooked dish. Now, with regards to Tisha B'Av itself, so as you said at the beginning, Lynn, it's the saddest day of the year. And we have a whole progression towards it. We have the restrictions of the 3 weeks and the restrictions of the 9 days, then Shavua Shehalbo, the week of Tisha B'Av, and then you come to Erev Tisha B'Av, and then you come to Tisha B'Av itself. And this is the height of our sadness, indeed the saddest day of the calendar. And the night is very sad, and the day is very sad. The Syrians have a very unique custom, which I don't know if other communities, I don't think any other communities have this. And that is that from Minha, in the afternoon, from Chatzot, then the whole spirit changes. Of course, the restrictions of the fast still apply till the end of the day, but it's a much more upbeat and joyous occasion, to the extent that the minhag was, and still is in Syrian communities, that on Mincha, on Tisha B'Av afternoon, we sing parts of the prayer. So on Tisha B'Av morning, on the evening, no one would ever think of singing Kedusha, Nakdishach v'Na'aritzach. You wouldn't sing that. It's inappropriate to sing that. It's a sad day. How can you be singing joyous tunes? But yet when it comes to Tisha B'Av afternoon, when it comes to the Minha, Kedusha is sung, like on the Shabbat tune. When it comes to the taking out of the Torah, the regular songs are sung when you take out the Torah, despite the fact that in the morning we don't sing. You're not allowed to sing in the morning. It's inappropriate. But this reflects, which is mentioned in the Hidar, Rabbi Yosef Haim David Azulai, about 250 years ago, where he wrote that the minhag in many places was that after midday, the woman would start to actually, that was in those days, it was the woman, they would clean the houses and prepare it and sweep it and make it beautiful for the night, because they would have a big feast and they would get ready for it. What's the idea behind this? The idea behind this is, despite the fact that it's Tisha B'Av and it's the saddest day of the calendar, nonetheless, we are in hope. We live our lives with hope. We what we call tikva in Hebrew. It's that line. The root of the word tikva in Hebrew is a kav. A kav is a line. Tikva gives us a line, gives us an ambition, gives us an aspiration for life. And yet, even in the deepest times, we recognize that actually there is tikva, there is hope. And so in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, we actually sing the parts of the prayer. The very same word for exile in Hebrew is gala, gimel lamed hey. The noun is galut, but the root of the word is gala, gimel lamed hey. There's an old idea from the Maharal of Prague 500 years ago, where he wrote the word gala is almost identical, exile, to the word redemption. Ga'al, geula is the noun, but the verb is ga'al, gimel aleph lamed. They both have gimel, they both have lamed, and the difference is aleph and hey. And the idea being is that the Geula is essentially the Galut with when we recognize Hashem is one. That's the Ga'al, is the Aleph, is the Yichud Hashem, is the unity of God. And so the whole idea of Tisha B'Av is the idea that we don't want this to be, we want to transform it. We have to go through the period of mourning, but we live in hope, and we want it to be exchanged for a happy day. It's well known that the famous, infamous is better to say, the infamous messianic impostor Shabtai Tzvi, when in the 1650s and the 1660s, when he came out and declared himself as the Mashiach, he actually changed Tisha B'Av to a happy day. Not only that, but like on Shabbat and on Yom Tov, we add in Ya'aleh V'Yavo. He added in Ya'aleh V'Yavo for Tisha B'Av. So we live with that. That's the hope that we live with. We were able to change it, and therefore we actually sing in the afternoon. There is another custom amongst many of the Damascus Jews, which is not halachically acceptable, but I will share it because this is what people did. And it may not be the right thing, but this is what people did. So there is a place in north of Damascus. I will just share the screen now. And I will show you where, 1 second. Let me stop share. Okay, it's frozen. Let me try again. So here, let me share it now. So there is a place. This is Damascus here. If you go about 1 hour up, you will get to a place called Bludan. So Bludan is near bordering Lebanon. So Lebanon's here, of course. And this would be a famous holiday vacation spot for people from Damascus. It's about an hour in the car. And remarkably, people would go after Hatzot, after midday. They would travel from Damascus to Bludan, it's the mountains, literally on the border, very near to Lebanon. And they would spend the whole afternoon there, just having a good time. Now, some of them would eat. Some of them observed the fast only till midday, and that's clearly incorrect and not halachically acceptable. But this was a common practice. But even the idea of going on a vacation essentially and traveling up to the mountains and having a good time on Tisha B'Av is, you would think, would be inappropriate. But nonetheless, this is what happened, and many people did this. They took the day off and they went up north and they enjoyed the day. And the only limud zechut, I suppose the only way we can look at this in a positive light is based on what we've said, is the hope and anticipation, and this day will be transformed to a happy day. And so they would, despite the fact Mashiach hasn't come yet, they would go to the mountains pretending Mashiach is here, and therefore excusing themselves from the rest of the fast and being able to enjoy themselves. A couple of other things, you'll see this in Arabic cultures, but especially amongst the Syrians, is that when we read the Kinot, and especially when we read Eicha, this is a concept in the Talmud already, where they would hit themselves. They'll hit their legs and bang themselves whilst reading as a kind of sadness. At funerals, they would do this mitapehin, they would clap and they would bang themselves and hit themselves. And you still see this in some Islamic cultures, that people hit themselves as a kind of mourning. And so this would be very common in the liturgy throughout the Tisha B'Av, but specifically when reading the book of Eicha, people would, bang themselves and hit themselves on their legs as a kind of reminder of the sadness that they were going through. And the final thing I will say is with regards to tefillin. When someone loses a loved one, they don't put on tefillin until the person is buried. And even on the day of the burial, some opinions hold that you don't put on tefillin, even after the burial. The idea being that tefillin is what we call pe'er. Pe'er is something which is honorable. It's a delight to wear. And so on a uniquely sad time, such as the first day of mourning, there are some opinions that we don't wear tefillin. And so sometime in history, it developed the custom, this is already an old custom going back to the times of the Geonim over 1,000 years ago, not to wear tefillin on Tisha B'Av. Some held not to wear it at all. You skip the day. But basically the compromise became that you wear tefillin, but you wear it in the afternoon. And that is the minhag of the Ashkenazim and many of the Sephardim as well. They don't wear tefillin in the morning, but they do wear it in the afternoon. However, some of the Sephardim, this is especially in Israel, this happens, and this is also the minhag of the Syrians, is that we do wear tefillin in the morning regularly. And so if you do go to a Syrian synagogue on Tisha B'Av, bring your tefillin within the morning, unlike in other synagogues where generally speaking you don't wear tefillin in the morning and you only wear it in the afternoon. So to summarize, we've discussed the concept of the Sudah HaMafseket, the Mejuddara, the unique dish. We discussed also the hope that we have after midday, which is why the cleaning of the house and also the cleaning of the house and also the singing and chanting of various parts of the service in the afternoon, and also the custom of some to go and travel on vacation, and finally tefillin on Tisha B'Av. So my prayer is that Tisha B'Av this year and its customs will not be applicable, including the Kinot, which we will hopefully have skip out, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we will have a day which will be transformed. Me'ever le'yom tov, from mourning to gladness. Amen.
Well, amen to that. Thank you very much indeed, Dayan Kada. So I'd like to travel sort of southeast to Africa and ask Etan Shelemay, who was actually born in Asmara, to be our third speaker. Now, he's a member of the Adenite community in London. So, Etan, over to you.
Etan, don't unmute yourself.
Yeah,
You've
you have
muted,
to,
just
yeah,
unmute yourself.
Yeah, that's better. Can't hear you.
Etan, you need to unmute yourself.
So,
No, you're still mute. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah, I think we're there.
Is that okay?
yes,
Perfect,
yes, we
great,
can hear you
thanks.
now. Over to you, Etan.
Thank you. As I was just saying, I'm not going to go into halachot, etc. I'm just going to describe how was Erev Tisha B'Ab and Tisha B'Ab commemorated in Aden and in Asmara when I was small. As Lynn said, I wasn't born in Aden, I was born in Asmara, but the minhagim of Tisha B'Av, etc., I picked up from home, from my late father, from the synagogue, and from the community at large. Before we start, I'd like to say, to give thanks to Dr. Doron Yaakov, who is an expert in Adeni minhagim and in Adeni pronunciation. He's from Israel, and I checked all the information that I had regarding the minhagim for Tisha B'Av with him, and we came to the same conclusion. So we start with Erev Tisha B'Av. Already from the morning, I remember people were in the faces of people. Men went to their businesses, their merchants, they had their shops, etc. The housewife at home, when they basically finished work, they would finish work very early during the day, or probably thought, and then going to prayers, etc. They will go home, and what the men see when he got home, you would find that all the rooms were bare. On the floor was totally bare. You wouldn't see any rugs or any mat. Various rooms, you'd see nothing was tidied up. All the tables did not have any tablecloth. And basically, he would meet his wife or the children, their mother, in what I would call probably tattered clothes which are appropriate for someone who is Aved. The men would then also change their clothes, change their shoes, and they would sit down and have their meal. I remember we did not have egg as being the final meal. We had a dish called lub. In Aden, lub was a soupy dish made out of kidney beans. So it was cooked kidney beans with soup, and you had that one with bread. Then people went to the synagogue just before Arvit, and in the synagogue earlier in the afternoon, the porechat that covers the ark was removed. All the Sifrei Torah inside the ark were covered, apart from the one that was going to be used next day in the morning for Shahri. But the rest, they were all covered in a black cloth, and the teva was also covered similarly. All the benches were taken out of the synagogue. So when you went to the synagogue, you saw the benches all outside, and basically they leaned or tilted the benches against the wall. I think this probably comes from the minhag that when there is an avelut in a house, and after the kvura, they normally, I think, tilt the bed of the person, of the deceased, against the wall. They cover it and they put a 24-hour memorial candle near there. I'm not sure, but I think it's related possibly to that. People went inside the synagogue, and everyone went and sat on the floor, no cushions, no low chairs. Everyone sat on the floor, on the spot where they would not, where they normally they would have sat down on the bench during the normal time. They all sat down, and you could see that, you know, everyone was in a very somber mood. You know, everyone sad, etc. As darkness started to fall, the leader of the community, call him the Dayan, the president of the community, etc. As he walked in, normally everyone would stand. On this occasion, no one stood, and he just walked in with a bowed head, and would go and sit down on the spot where he normally would sit, but again on the floor. And at that point, they would start to chant Al Naharet Babel. This is a song, you know, on the rivers of Babylon. But I can assure you, it wasn't to the tune of the Bonnie M song. When they started chanting that Al Naharet Babel, you could actually see the people starting to cry and sob. Today, I've been to many synagogues, and you find some places where, especially the elderly, you can see them crying. But I remember when I was small, and what I've been told about Eden, nearly everyone cried during the reading of the Lamentation. At the Amida prayer, both in Arvit and Shaharit, we add, normally in Minha, on Tisha B'Ab, you say, Rahem al et Avlet Zion, Nahem et Avlet Zion, et Avlei Yerushalayim, etc. But on Arvit and Shaharit, we would actually say, Rahem al Avlet Zion, ve'al Yerushalayim, ve'al Ha'ir. And I think here, why do we change it? Why do we say on Arvit and Shaharit Rahem, and on Minha we say Nahem? Because Nahem is the normal, where I think nearly every community uses Nahem. I think again it comes to the Avelut. Arvit and Shaharit depicting an Avel that his dead person, his relative, is still in front of him, is not been buried. Is still in front of him. And when you go to visit someone who is really, in a way, not an Avel, he's an Onen, who's a person, a relative who has got someone who passed away, is called Onen until the Kvura. And I think at that point in time, up to the Kvura, you don't give Tanhumim, you don't console another. You have, in a way, like mercy, Rahem. So you try to have Rahamanut on the person, but you don't do Tanhumim at that point. But in Minha, it considers as though now you have buried the person. So the Avilut of Yerushalayim, etc., is now, in a way, it's now post-burial. And as such, I think that is when you now can say Nahem. You are now consoling the people, or consoling in a way Yerushalayim. So in Arvit, after Dishtit Kabal, then they will start to do the lamentation of Lemi Avke Vekaf Ake, which is, I think, in most communities. But the way that they did it, the whole congregation read a pasuk, and the rabbi read the section, and the rabbi repeated the last pasuk. After they read Echa, they had a special kinot, that's the old Adenite custom, which were 12 kinot, specifically for Tisha B'Ab. So they would read all those kinot. Those kinot, as far as I understand, were composed by Rav Yehuda Levi and Rav Abraham ben Ezra. At the end of the kinot, many people would go outside, sit on the pavement, and they would read the story of Hannah and the 7 children. In Adenite, they would call it Usat Hanno, the story of Hannah. And they read it in an Arabic dialect, to the Adenite Arabic dialect. And the words, if you hear them, are really every word, it's just like would be like a pin in your heart. The way it was composed in Arabic, again, people outside would just listen and cry on what happened. Again, one thing that the Adenite custom normally don't do is counting the years. Many shuls now do count the years at the end of Arvit to say there are so many years since the destruction, but it wasn't a custom in Eden to do that. And again, it wasn't a custom when I was small in our shul in Asmara to do that. In Shaharit, as Rabbi Kada mentioned, we don't wear tefillin. We do wear a talit gadol, but without making a bracha. But the tefillin was not worn. The tefillin was definitely worn at mincha time. And just as an aside, every ta'anit, apart from, of course, Yom Kippur, we wear tefillin in the morning, but also in mincha. Those people who are fasting, they normally would wear talit and tefillin in mincha. After the Amidah, they would read the Arif Sefer Gumi, and then they would take the Sefer Torah, and after the reading of the Sefer Torah, there is the Haftarah, which is the Atof HaSifem. But in our minhag, we actually precede that with the Ko Amar Hashem Amdu Al Derachim, which is from Yirmiyahu. So there are a couple of sentences that precede the Haftarah. On returning the Haftarah, they will read the Al Hechali Yavke. And then after that, they would say Ashrei Ubarit Zion, Mizmor Le'asaf, followed by the Kina of Lemi Yavke, before reading again Echa. Again, the kinot would be the same as what they read the evening before, nighttime, but they would add an extra one, which is regarding the Asara Harugei Malchut, the 10 rabbis that were barbarically murdered by the emperor at the time. After that, they would read the Sefer Iyov. Sefer Iyov took probably, I would guess, at least 2 hours, because the way it was done, the rabbi would read the first sentence, and then the whole congregation would repeat it. And then the person sitting next to the rabbi, going anti-clockwise, would read the next sentence, and the whole congregation would repeat the sentence. And then the next person, again, going anti-clockwise. And you would continue doing that until you have completed the whole of Sefer Yom. People didn't leave shul probably until at least 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, well after Hatzot. After that, they would, of course, finish the prayers. And basically, you'd go home. I remember as a kid, at home in the afternoon, I would meet up with my friends. And that in order to pass the time, we used to play either cards or marbles. And the currency used to play when we played cards was the sweets that we saved from Simchat Torah. So in Simchat Torah, when you went round, etc., every kid collected at least a couple of bagfuls of sweets. And basically, how much can you eat during the year? So he would always have quite a lot of sweets remaining that on Tisha B'Ab in the afternoon, when you played cards, you use those sweets as currency when you play the cards. Really, how the whole of Tisha B'Ab, the key thing that I remember, the key important things are how people were really sad, crying during the lamentation. The whole atmosphere was really very somber and sad. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Etan. That was absolutely fascinating. So what I would like is for you to share your memories. I mean, if you were born in an Arab country, what were the sort of things that you remember of Tisha B'Av? Just write your observations, or if you have any questions in the chat at the bottom of your screen. Now, this idea of being really sad, I heard it. I think it was in Morocco that people actually collect their tears in a vial for Jerusalem. Is that something you've heard of, Rabbi Bouskila?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
No.
No.
Or maybe it's just not done anymore.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, there's many customs. I went to many synagogues growing up. Various places. But Tisha B'Av, always a Moroccan synagogue with my father, may rest in peace. I learned these kinot, the few that I chanted tonight, and many others from him directly. But I don't remember that being a tradition that I heard of.
Right. And something else I came across, actually, it was Professor Shmuel Moreh, the late professor from the Hebrew University. He said that in Iraq, where he was from, they painted a black stripe around the Jewish houses. And I've not been able to verify that either. I don't know if any of you have heard of this custom.
If I may, can I add something?
Yes, please do.
Why don't I put all
Like
the
to share-
speakers onto Spotlight?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Please
share
do.
something very
Yeah.
quickly. I
Yeah,
saw in the
please
chat
do.
that there was a mention about something that we've seen here in Israel, obviously in this past very, very difficult and continuously difficult moment. I've been here since October 3rd, and my wife and I made Aliyah this year. It's been a very, very difficult and challenging year here, but a very meaningful year to move here under these circumstances. And there is a lot of talk about what Tisha B'Av is going to look like this summer in light of October 7th. And I saw in the chat somebody mentioned that there is a Kina that was composed, one of the Lamentations called Kinat Be'eri, about the kibbutz Be'eri and what happened in the south. This is a tradition that's important to understand. As I mentioned, unfortunately, the book of Kinot has grown and grown exponentially over the years. We could read, if we read all of the Kinot that are in all traditions, we would spend much longer than 25 hours sitting. There's so many Kinot, it's difficult to read all of them. There are some that have become like the classic ones, but there are so many. I want to mention to you just one that I discovered today, this afternoon, which is timely in the sense of understanding how Kinot were written for the moment. So the rabbi that I most study and that I consider to be my mentor, I never met him, but he is the rabbi who is the spiritual mentor for my organization, and I think should be for the Jewish people, is the Rishon LeZion, the chief Sephardic rabbi, the first Sephardic rabbi of Israel, Harav Ben Zion Meir Chai Uziel Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Rabbi Uziel was the only chief rabbi, Sephardi or Ashkenazi, who served under the Ottoman Empire, the British Mandate, and for the first 5 years of Israel. He passed away in 1953, the state of Israel. The building that I work in every day in the old city of Jerusalem was once upon a time the Talmud Torah, the Sephardic Talmud Torah, and the Yeshivat Tiferet Yerushalayim of the old city of Jerusalem, the Sephardic school where Rabbi Uziel studied and then taught. And Rabbi Uziel was, by 1948, when Israel was in the War of Independence, he was, by that time, the chief rabbi. He became the chief Rishon LeZion in 1939 under the British Mandate, inaugurated in the synagogue right next door to our buildings, the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the 4 Sephardic synagogues. Now, he wrote extensively about how difficult the siege on Jerusalem was. Okay, this is someone who lived through almost another Chorban, destruction of Jerusalem, where the Jews were expelled from the old city. And I discovered something fascinating. We know that the siege on Jerusalem was in the month of May during the War of Independence, and the Rova, the Jewish quarter, the Jews were expelled by the Jordanians from the Jewish quarter on May 28th, 1948, which was on the Hebrew calendar, the 19th of Iyar of the year 5708. I discovered today in the archival collection that we have of Rabbi Uziel, I discovered this. It's a printed Kina that's very beautiful in terms of its language. It also follows the classic poetic tradition of all the Paitanim, that the first stanza, when we know the author, sometimes you could identify the author based on reading the letters of the first stanza, and it spells his name. So the first stanza has Bet, and then Nun, and Tzadi, etc., and it spells Ben Zion Uziel. All the stanzas together spell out his name. But then I looked and said, when was this written? What did he write it about? Is it another Tisha B'Ab Kina? It says that he composed this. This was printed back in the day, and he composed it on the 19th of Sivan. That's 1 month after the fall of the Jewish quarter, 5708, and he composed it for it to be read that coming Tisha B'Av. Remember, the Rova fell in the month of May. This was in June. He composed this for the first Tisha B'Av that the Jewish people would be experiencing as a sovereign Jewish people in over 2,000 years, but without the old city of Jerusalem. And it's just absolutely fascinating to see how, for him and his generation, the loss of the old city, something that I take for granted. I go to work in the old city every day. We walk in and out. We could not. And for 19 years, and we lost it. We, on one hand, it was like leaving the contrast between Egypt and Jerusalem, the celebration and the mourning. Here, on one hand, we celebrated Yom HaAtzmaut, the celebration of an independent Jewish state, but we did so without the glory of Jerusalem, the old city, the Kotel, and so on. This was so painful to Rabbi Uziel, who was born and raised in the old city of Jerusalem, that he composed a beautiful Kina that was 1 month to the day after the Jews were expelled in that terrible, tragic scene, waving white flags, leaving the old city of Jerusalem. B'tzetim Yerushalayim, leaving Jerusalem again, he composed this Kina. This is just another demonstration of how Tisha B'Av is not just about the past. It's unfortunately a very living and breathing part of our identity. We embrace the tragedies that took place, and we own them. And that was Rabbi Uziel in 1948. That's the Kina of Be'eri, composed by Yigal Harush today in 2023-24. This coming Tisha B'Av, October 7th, is going to be a major theme. Much more so, I would say, the discussions will be more than the destruction of Jerusalem of 2,000 years ago. Will be the destruction of the South and Hamas and everything else. It's important to recognize how relevant a day it is. The traditions that we decorate the day with are important, but the core, as Jews from all places, Yemen, Syria, Morocco, Poland, Germany, Jerusalem, it makes no difference. It is a day that should unify us in understanding the tragedies that befell us and the prayers of redemption and hope. Thank you.
Thank you. That is wonderful. It just goes to show how it is still a living tradition, as you say, that people add to, unfortunately. But also one of hope, isn't it? As you say, that there's always a hopeful ending, even if it's the sweets that you have at the end.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask you one thing about bad luck, about Tisha B'Ab bringing bad luck? Because, you know, talking to people, they say they were told not to go swimming in case they drowned, and this sort of thing. I mean, were there any prohibitions, you know, in your communities?
I could
yeah,
if I could respond to that with a little bit of, you know, there was, growing up, you know, I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a first generation American. My parents from Morocco and Algeria. We spoke French at home, and the language that my parents spoke when they didn't want us to understand was Arabic. And there were a lot of words that we picked up along the way. Whenever my father would bump into somebody or saw someone in this, you know, in a store or something that for whatever reason he didn't like, we never figured out until I figured it out many, many years later, what he was calling that person. If I were to transliterate it into English, it would be T-E-C-H-A-B-A-B, Chabab. And I would go like, why is he calling this person Chabab? Until I said like, Chabab, Tisha B'Ab. He's calling that person Tisha B'Ab, because why was that? That is like, you know, the darkest insult you can give somebody is to name them Tisha B'Av, because it's a day of bad luck. It's a day of darkness. We don't swim during the 9 days. We don't eat certain foods. We don't have court hearings. If you can avoid business deals, buying new things, if you buy something new and you wear it, it's going to tear. It's going to bring bad luck. I grew up with all of that. I mean, like very, very much. Every single thing that we could or couldn't do. I mean, the 9 days of Tisha B'Av were in many ways more prohibitive than Shabbat in terms of like what we were allowed and not to do, because of the many superstitions that you're talking about. You know, don't, if we bought a new pair of leather shoes that week and they tore, they would say, it's because you bought leather shoes on Tisha of the week, you're not supposed to wear all these sorts of things. Yeah, those are still very prominent. Yeah,
that's fascinating. I don't know if any of you know the memoirs of Susie Vidal, Sultana Latifa. She was from Egypt, and she wrote an anecdote about Tisha B'Av, which she called Yom Echa. And there were certain expressions that were current. If you said Echa Ale, that was an expression of disbelief. You know, you're kidding. And she said her mother was born on Yom Echa, and she was convinced that she was bound to be unlucky, you know, either fall off a ladder or burn her hand on boiling oil or have money stolen while out shopping. And this sort of thing. I hope it never actually happened to her, but it's terrible to actually live your life under the shadow of this fear that you might have bad luck just because of the day you were born.
One of the other, when you say one of the days that we're born, you know, one of the other, Dayan Kada spoke a lot about the hope on the day of Tisha B'Av, and that like in the afternoon, there's kind of a switch in the feel in the Syrian community, the liturgy gets a little bit more upbeat and so on. It's because what's interesting, you know, Judaism lives in the paradox between this and this. And so according to Talmudic tradition, when we talk and we anticipate the Messiah, there's a Talmudic tradition that says, what day will the Messiah be born? Tisha B'Av. On Tisha B'Av will be the birthday of the Mashiach. On the day of tragedy and downfall and destruction, is also the day of the day that represents the destruction of the temple. The Redeemer that will bring about the news of rebuilding the temple and so on and so forth will be born on that day. Here in Israel, that became a very famously well-known thing. In 1966, this is not a Sephardic story, but it's just interesting to that. Israel's first and only Nobel Prize winner in literature, the author Shai Agnon, it's been checked. He was born in Bochach in Europe, and his birth certificate does not, when you check, you see what day he was born on a different date, but he claimed throughout his life, in every speech and every document, all the way to in his tombstone, he's buried on Mount of Olives, Har Zeitim, that his birthday was Tisha B'Ab, that he was born on Tisha B'Ab. Now, people will say, did he consider himself the Messiah? No. The reason why he gave himself that birthday is because his writing was an act of redemption, trying to rebuild the Jewish people through words, which we do. And so again, taking that tradition that Judaism's story, unfortunately, of exile has been for 2,000 years, a lot of Tisha B'Av. And so on that day, I'm going to use that day and say, I'm born that day, and from Tisha B'Av, I'm going to build. And that's what we hope to do. We use his story as an inspiration for all of us, Sephardim and Ashkenazim, to say, from the day of Lamentation, we hope that it's going to be not the Kina of Manishtana, but the singing of Manishtana of Pesach, that from the day of mourning, we will build together again a day of hope, a day of redemption, a day of celebration. This is our prayer.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and Ariel says that he would get a present on that day. Isn't that interesting? A bit like Purim. Yeah.
I think, Danny, do you want to come in here? You asked to unmute.
No, I was just gonna say it's been mentioned here in the chat box from Vivian actually that we actually didn't refer to the day of Tisha B'Av. It's referred to as Yom Echa.
Yeah.
Actually, we talk about it as Yom Echa. And what Rabbi Bouskila was saying, if you wanted to, really insult someone, you call him Tisha B'Av, we actually say Echa, that person. Oh, Echa, that person.
Wow.
Person's like a really depressed person or a really annoying person. Echa.
Mm.
It's funny how in all the different customs, Tisha B'Av has really. I just want to say one thing about bad luck. I think it's important to put out what I believe is the authentic and classical understanding is that none of these things are bad luck or mazal. It's just getting us in the right frame of mind for the morning. People take it the wrong way and they associate it with superstitious elements of bad luck. We can't swim and we can't do these things not because we're going to drown, but because it's inappropriate to be enjoying ourselves with such leisurely activities at such a sad time in our calendar. People though, like superstitious things and they have a tendency to seek out superstitious things within simple meanings, and so they took this in all different ways. But essentially we must remember that there's a principle in the Talmud, En Mazal Yisrael. If we live with God, then we're above Mazal. We don't have to worry about Mazal. When you start worrying about Mazal and you take your trust away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then indeed, then Mazal can have an effect on you and bad luck can have an effect on you. But we must reject such notions. That's not the way we think about Judaism and Tisha B'Av.
Okay, that's wonderful. I think on that note, we will probably close this meeting. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. That was really wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Rabbi Bouskila, somebody asked the name of your synagogue, and that's the Sephardic Educational Center.
It's not a synagogue; it's a educational center.
It's an educational
center. We do have a synagogue on campus, but it's a very beautiful jewel in the I would call it the Sephardic jewel in the crown of the old city. We're at the gates of the Jewish quarter. 3-building campus right next to the 4 Sephardic synagogues. You can't miss us. We are the Kotel is our backyard.
Yes.
Upstairs from
Very
us. It's a very
wonderful.
beautiful place.
Right.
So welcome you to come anytime.
Yeah.
Rabbi Bouskila, we're going to take you up on it. We hope to be there Chol HaMoed Sukkot, so we're coming for tea.
Okay.
English tea. We'll
I-
bring the tea bags.
I'll tell you that Chol HaMoed Sukkot this past year was beautiful, and then it got, unfortunately, it was, I was here on Chol HaMoed Sukkot. It was one of the
Yeah.
most beautiful weeks I spent, but Shabbat,
Does not,
We will-
unfortunately.
Shabbat
Can
was
I
like,
Yeah,
can I just make one comment?
Yes,
In looking for the date, it's very interesting. I just have to, on that note, it's important to say, there's been a big debate all year long in this country about what date will be the anniversary of October 7th. Will it be observed on October 7th? Will it be observed on the Hebrew calendar date? Should we not have a day and just do it on Tisha B'Ab? This is a debate that's 2,000 years old, and it's been this year as well. That do you establish a day for it? So October 7th is the day that everybody thinks of, okay? The Hebrew calendar date was Simchat Torah. Here in Israel, Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah observed in one day. It's not the 2 days like in the diaspora. And everybody, religious people who usually will vote for, let's do it on the Hebrew date, like the Yom Kippur War's anniversary is on Yom Kippur, not October 6th, etc. Everybody, including religious people, said it must be on the secular date or on some other date, not on the day of the Hebrew calendar. Why? Everybody that I've spoken to answered, they say, otherwise, we will turn the most joyous day of the year, Simchat Torah, into Tisha B'Ab. And we don't want to do that. We don't want that Simchat Torah should be annually remembered and observed as a Tisha B'Ab. It's bad enough the way it was this year. Let's not perpetuate that on that day. Find another day to remember it. If it has to be the secular date, so be it. October 7th, it'll be October 7th and not the Hebrew date, the 21st of Tishrei, or the 22nd of Tishrei, because it's too difficult to take a day that's called Simchat Torah and to mourn on that day what happened on October 7th. So it's interesting that Tisha B'Av has been in our conversation, in our lingo all year here in that discussion.
Yeah, that's. I think they're right there. Actually, not
I
just
completely
Simchat
agree.
Torah.
100%. Yeah, it would just be very difficult to do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I think as is our custom, we haven't got any advertisements. I just wanted
I've got the advertisements.
Oh, you got the
Of course I've got
advertisements?
everything ready there.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to have our commercial break. Then what we usually do is unmute everybody so you can say whatever you want to say. Thank you or goodbye
Talk to your
or
friends,
whatever.
darling.
So our next event is something completely different. Lulwa Chazun, who is an activist for the rights of Jews from Arab countries, also a musician. She will talk about how she has been through a healing process after October the 7th by composing music and singing and dancing. So that's on the 20th of August. It'll be very different. And we keep the sort of musical theme, if you like. The 3rd of September, the famous musician Maurice El Medioni, who's born in Algeria. We have a tribute to him with clips from his music. That is sure to be absolutely fascinating. And just before Rosh Hashanah, we have an evening about the Rosh Hashanah Seder and how the Seder is celebrated in different Sephardi communities. So we'll be talking to 3 cooks or 3 experts on food. That's the 17th of September. And then, of course, there's our annual commemoration on the 20th of November, which is actually going to be in person but also online, and that's on the Jews of Iran.
And we've got very special musicians coming.
Yeah, and we're bringing in the Dardashti sisters from New York, who will put on a multimedia presentation about their grandfather, who was a singer. So without further ado, do you want to unmute everyone? Yeah?
I will.
Okay, Ariel.
But what we normally do for those who don't come, we try and do it in this kind of civilized way. I mean, everyone is now unmuted, but can you please raise your hand? Because what we don't want is 48 people screaming at the same time. Which,
no, they won't. They're very well behaved.
I'm just going to remove all the spotlights. So give me 1 minute. Sorry, Holly, do you want to speak? Have you got your hand up? Sorry. Then turn her sound off.
I didn't.
That's okay. Our speakers, you were fascinating. It was a very fascinating talk. I learned a lot about Tu B'Shuv. Rabbi Daniel, to bring you good luck, I ate for lunch Yehuda matzah and Yehuda sweet gefilte fish made in Jerusalem. So that will bring you good luck. And Lawrence and Lynn, as always, thank you so very much.
Ariel, do you want to try now? We had a problem with your sound. That it could have been something on the Zoom.
Oh, Ariel.
Thank you, Holly. That was
thanks,
wonderful.
Ariel.
Keep eating the matzah.
Do you want to try now?
Okay. Ariel.
Ariel?
Est-ce que tu veux parler?
Do we lose Ariel?
What happened to him? Oh, okay. Never mind.
No, we can't hear. Amy, you had your hand up very patiently.
Ariel, dis quelque chose. No.
You see?
Yeah, you see, you're all right, but he's not.
Amy, if you want to unmute yourself, you have your hand up. And sorry about the technical problems.
Yeah,
It was
just,
out of control.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I changed my microphone. Yes, I just say that I found from the Jewish book from Algeria, a Kina, written by Annie Raphael, and there was singing with a melody of my Normandy, and as it is written ici, quand tout renaît de l'espérance, as Rabbi Bouskila said, in the morning it was truly Tisha B'Ab, and the spirit changed in the afternoon. For this we receive also, the children receive presents. So this is not only destruction, finish,
yes,
destruction, tikva, that we have. The Kohanim don't go to the Sefer Torah in our Spanish synagogue, and we were eating the lentilles. Adashim, I don't know you.
Lentils.
So it is, and it was not a question of superstition or something like this. It was a protection of the spirit of the period. And to go to the sea or not to go to the sea, it was principally because what we say in French, l'équinoxe, very hard. The sea was very hard, so it's better not to go this because the period with the sun and the moon, and that's one of the reason. But we feel it that something. But the direction was with the tikva. The direction was to Israel. The direction, the land of our father. That we're living in the how you call it, how we call it, ki gunavti me eretz ha'ivrim. They stole me from the land of the Hebrew. Say Joseph say,
Hey, why?
Right, that's fascinating. Who wrote the Kina? Asked
the rabbi is Raphael.
Raphael, okay.
אני רפאל. אל טוב חונן עינה את הצפינה, השיחה ההימה כיונה, la rime, beautiful
Yeah,
rime.
it rhymes. It
Oili
rhymes.
al galut השכינה, וזה שכינה is גלות, שלושה נחותים. It's from the שיר השירים, אם כן רעייתי בין הבנות. And the song was quand vous venez de l'espérance, from the tikva, you know. So in
Yeah, it's all about hope. Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Was it Amy who just wanted to say something before we
Yes,
end?
I'm sorry, I missed it again. Were you referring to the Sephardic Educational Center?
Yes, that's
Rabbi
correct. It's not a synagogue, but there is a synagogue attached. Sephardi Educational Center.
I should mention that this about 10 years ago, for those who said that they want to come stay at the Sephardic Educational Center. So we, on our campus, opened the most beautiful hotel in the old city of Jerusalem called the Sephardic House Hotel. And I welcome you to look it up on Orbit or Expedia or hotels.com. You can stay there. People ask us why we built such a beautiful hotel. The answer is, again, Tisha B'Ab. Because when the Messiah comes, we know that building the Beit HaMikdash, if you've ever remodeled in Israel or in the old city of Jerusalem, he's going to come, Messiah. There's going to be big celebrations. The next morning, he's going to go to the Temple Mount to build the temple. And the municipality of Jerusalem is going to come and say, where's your building permit? We need to see your permit. They're going to tell, he's going to say, I'm the Messiah. And they're going to say, so is my grandfather. Show me the permit. You know, it's going to take him a long, long time. And we decided that we need to build a very, very beautiful place so that he has a room to stay in the old city of Jerusalem when he's building the third temple. So until he comes and uses that messianic suite, I invite any of you to come 365 days a year and stay in the most beautiful hotel in the old city of Jerusalem on our campus of the Sephardic Educational Center. It's called Sephardic House Hotel. I strongly encourage you to come.
Are you reserving a room for the Messiah, or can we use his
Well, you
room?
know, if you reserve, he's had a running reservation for 2,000 years. So, you know,
So does that mean there's always a spare room? So if you knock on your door and all the other rooms are taken, we can say we'll have the Messiah's room.
Exactly. Right. That's why he didn't come. He came, you know, he arrived and we were overbooked. So he went to another hotel and he said, I didn't like it. It wasn't a Sephardic. He said, remember, he's going to come stay in a Sephardic hotel because he knows the food
is. Of course. The food is better for a start.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I just like to thank our three speakers tonight. It's a very special evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed once again.
And Lynn, I look forward to my lentils and majada on 9 days.
Can't wait for the majada. Yes, and I wish you all an evening fast, those of you who are marking Tisha B'Ab. May we only have good things and happy things and hopeful things in the future. I hope to see you again in August, and thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.